Sanibonani Mzansi. I am your host Candice Kumalo and I welcome you to another episode of the Health from Mzansi podcast. Imagine crops that are not only resistant to pests and disease, but also have improved crop nutrition and resilience to tackle some of the world's most pressing health challenges. Yes, those are just some of the highlights of the fascinating world of genome editing. Joining me to unpack more of the incredible benefits of genome editing as the plant biotechnology lead at CropLife South Africa, Chantel Arendse. Thank you so much for joining me, Chantel. Can you please just start by telling us a bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
I'm Chantel Arendse. I'm the plant biotech lead at CropLife South Africa. And that is where I manage the plant biotech portfolio for South Africa, looking after the interest of our technology developers that have registered plant biotech products in South Africa.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Chantel. I guess let's move on to today's discussion on genome editing. So, Chantel, genome editing can sound like a very technical term at first glance. So could you just give us a brief overview of what genome editing is and how it works and basically just why it's important?
Genome editing, I fully agree, it can be sometimes confusing. It's also sometimes called gene editing or it's called new breeding techniques. But just broadly, it refers to a collection of plant breeding tools. And so it allows plant breeders to make targeted changes within plants in order to improve them and develop better plant varieties. So that's just in simple terms. And just how does it work in practice? Well, editing tools, in order to edit a genome plant, these editing tools are delivered into the plants where they behave like a programmable pair of scissors with an attached GPS system. And they are able then to move exactly where they need to within the plant's DNA and make those changes at a specific site. And I know that sounds even more technical, but all I can say is the tools are used to move in plant to a specific site where they can optimize specific functions within the plant. So to give you an example, if you want to improve the plant's ability to resist a targeted pest, the tool can then be programmed to specifically make the change in those parts of the DNA that are involved in resistance. Or if you are trying to improve drought tolerance, the tools can be programmed to specifically effect changes in those genes or parts of the DNA involved in drought tolerance. So that is in a nutshell how genome editing works. And why is it important? Well, there are many different types of plant breeding that have contributed to increasing the productivity that we enjoy today in terms of ensuring that we are all food secure. But, in order to keep up with our growing population, it's important that we find newer tools that enable us to accelerate this breeding process and enable us to keep and match the growing population. So we need to keep on ensuring the different ways that we can ensure our food security gains.
I know that some may be unaware that we've actually always relied on technology and plant breeding methods to improve our agricultural practices. So how does genome editing fit into the broader history of these plant breeding technologies? How does it build on past methods and what innovations and advantages does it introduce?
Yes, that's correct. So modern agriculture has always, as you correctly said, relied on innovation and technology to boost agriculture's productivity. I think these plant breeding milestones began a long time ago during the era when we were just getting started with agriculture. And even back then, our earliest farmers were always selecting for crop varieties that looked more promising in terms of yields and were more resistant and better tasting. But over time, we got to be more clever and smarter and we got to understand how these specific characteristics that we see in crops, how they are passed from one generation to another. And that is when plant breeding really took off and advanced and delivered things like hybrid seeds, mutation breeding, and many other tools to deliver these improved crop varieties. And now, of course, the latest tool being genome editing that's also become part of that plant breeding toolbox. And so you've asked, what are the advantages? Well, I think with traditional breeding or the earlier methods, it involved taking two superior parent plants. So maybe a plant that has drought tolerance, a plant that has insect resistance, and then combining their genetics to generate lots and lots of offspring. But the problem is all of those thousands of offspring needed to be screened to find that one individual that carried both traits from the parents. Whereas now with genome editing, we are able to actually just go directly into the plant using these tools and make the necessary change within the plant. And so we are able to speed up the breeding process for crop improvement. And so we are able to do this with greater precision. As I mentioned, makes use of a GPS tracking system when the edits are made, and then also just brings greater predictability and efficiency. So I think just the bottom line is that we are able to accelerate this breeding changes so that we don't take years and years. We are able to shorten that to a couple of years only. And this is important. We don't have the luxury of time to make sure that we keep up producing enough food for everybody. So this tool definitely will help in that regard.
Chantel, you mentioned briefly that there have been many successful varieties of plant breeding methods. Can you also just share examples of successful genome-edited crops that have already started making a difference? And what potential do you see it having for locally significant crops?
We do not have any genome-edited crops commercially available in South Africa. But there are a few examples that are available in other parts of the world. So in the US, we have a genome-edited soybean variety that is being used to produce a high oleic soybean oil. This is an oil that is much healthier and has a longer shelf life. In the US, there's also a mustard green salad leaf that has been genome-edited so that it tastes better. It is also more nutritious because it has additional or elevated levels of vitamins and micronutrients. And as you know, we always want to offer consumers healthier food options. So this definitely helps to promote that. So that's in the US. And then in Japan, interestingly enough, we have a genome-edited tomato that has increased levels of a compound called GABA. And this is a compound that is believed to promote relaxation and help lower blood pressure. So these heart-healthy tomatoes, they are available in Japan. And so you can see that in terms of genome editing as a plant breeding tool, it's not just about changing our staple food crops. It's about changing or making beneficial edits to a wider range of food crops and also focusing on nutritional aspects and promoting access to healthier foods. So giving consumers, of course, direct health benefits. And then maybe just to point out why is it important for us here in South Africa? Well, I think these examples, they demonstrate at least the potential of the technology and that in terms of its versatility to be able to accelerate breeding and make those crop improvements, that potential will then also be available to address local agricultural and nutritional challenges in South Africa. Because as we learn from that technology and the successes elsewhere, that technology can also be applied locally to address our own local problems or issues that we have with agricultural production.
Chantel, you just touched on how genome editing can be beneficial for us in South Africa as well. And that brings me to my next question to ask if there are any long-term benefits that we could see in terms of food security, health, and access to better nutrition.
Being a farmer is not easy, and farming is vulnerable to all the external factors out there, including climate, including the price and availability of inputs, adverse growing conditions. So all of these affect the ability of farmers to produce enough food. So with this technology being available, there is an opportunity to focus on making improvements that include producing more yields on less land, developing climate resilient crops to reduce the risks that come with all of this and reduce crop failure. Just in terms of securing our food supply going forward, this is where the technology obviously can help to stabilize our food supply. And also when our food supply is stable, it means that our food is more affordable. So that's the one way it can contribute in terms of food security. But it doesn't end there. Of course, there are sectors of the population that are very health and nutritious conscious. They subscribe to a healthy lifestyle that includes following a healthy diet. From the examples I've just given earlier, you'll see that there is advancing research on how to build nutrition within a variety of staple food crops as well as our fruits and our vegetables, not only to enrich vitamins and minerals, but also to develop food varieties that have better health properties, that have reduced toxic compounds that potentially have health risks. So for those sectors of the population, this is how the technology can make a difference. And then also some people, they are susceptible to particular food types. And here you're specifically looking at people that suffer from allergies, food allergies, or are intolerant to certain components in food. So, for example, people with gluten sensitivities. I know that there's research underway to look at developing varieties of wheat that have reduced gluten content so that these people can once again have the ability to consume these products. So these are just some of the ways technology is in the long term going to benefit various sectors of the population and general consumers.
Chantel, while ensuring that maintaining our food supply and having useful and beneficial nutrition are just some of the key outcomes you highlighted, I believe genome editing has the potential to offer even more. So just beyond improved nutrition and food security, are there any other societal benefits we can expect from genome-edited crops?
In terms of the sustainability, in terms of how our food is produced and the sustainability values, and this is important for some consumers as well. Knowing how the food was produced and if it was produced in a sustainable way. So yes, the technology is also being applied to specifically focus on some of these traits that will make agriculture more sustainable. And these include making some plants more water efficient so that they limit the amount of water needed to grow, making some plants more nitrogen efficient so that they don't need as much fertilizer applications, and then also just trying to reduce the amount of emissions that agriculture puts into the environment. So that's on the sustainability issue. And then, of course, there are those that are environmentally conscious. And on this side, food spoilage and wastage could also be, a concern for some consumers. And here, applications with the technology, including developing crops that have a longer shelf life, especially in fresh produce, because this produce tends to spoil very quickly and end up in the waste bin before it gets used. So this is how the technology is helping to reduce the food that we toss away just by extending the shelf life of some of those fresh produce. And then beyond just agriculture, because we think of the technology and we think agriculture, but societal benefits include this technology include driving innovation in the medical field and, delivering human health benefits in the form of advancing treatments for specific diseases and even cancers. So that's just to give you an idea of just how versatile this technology is and in which sectors it is driving innovation.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of the Health from Mzansi podcast. To find out more about being the healthiest version of yourself, visit healthfromzansi.co.za, or you can send us an email to hello@healthfromzansi.co.za. This is the Health from Mzansi podcast, and your ears are always invited. As we come to the end of this episode, it's clear that genome editing offers us a powerful tool to reshape the way we think about food and health. It's not merely just a scientific breakthrough, but a tool that could help us tackle some of the most pressing challenges we face, like food security and chronic disease. Remember, the food on our plates and the health of our communities could be significantly shaped by innovations like these. Stay healthy and fancy. I am your host, Candice Kumalo. Until next time.